that cashed in on the lockdown PPE free-for-all might find themselves in hot water, even if they secured the tenders lawfully. The South African Health Products Regulatory Authority is still working with the SIU to investigate and charge companies who sold personal protective equipment without the required license. Let's go live now to Pretoria. Reporter BarryBateman is covering that story for us. Barry, good afternoon to you. The companies then require licenses to sell PPE. How does that work?
Yeah, good afternoon, Jeremy. That's something that I've just learned recently as well, that, for example, like a mask, you think it might be something quite simple, but if it is making a claim to provide some sort of medical support, or it makes some claim related to protecting the user against certain elements, such as whether it be viruses or the like, against respiratory diseases, the moment the device makes such claim and it is used in a medical environment, such as in hospitals or by doctors, well, then it needs to be registered. And the reason it needs to be registered is to ensure that whatever claim is being made by the product, it is actually carried out. There could be life and death implications if the products that are being sold on the understanding that they provide certain kind of protection and they're not. So it's that reason that the Health Products Regulatory Authority enforces or has a duty to enforce the requirements of the Medicines Act, which imposes the requirement on companies selling these devices to have a license which requires them to have the product tested and ensure that it meets the required standards.
All right, that makes perfect sense. So let's assume that you and I want to go into business. How do we go about obtaining such a license, and how difficult is it?
Well, one thing we can tell you now, Jeremy, it's not a case of just putting in a little piece of paper and it happens overnight. It's quite a thorough process. The device that has been considered a medical device, such as, let's say, an N95 mask, the supplier, the company that produces this actual device would first have to be registered with SAHPRA. So you can't just import it from anybody or anything. That needs to be registered first. But then also the distributor, you and I in our business, we would have to be registered. There's a process. There's a huge list of documents that we'd have to send in. They'd have to be vetted, and ultimately it would take us some time and money. It's about 25,000 Rand for a business to be registered to trade in these particular devices, and this takes time. So this overnight boom of companies that were selling these devices, the vast majority of them certainly do not have the required licenses.
Fair enough. So this is all now under investigation, Barry, by the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. We've mentioned that. Where do we stand with that particular investigation, and what role are they playing?
The Health Products Regulatory Authority, what they're telling me is that they're working closely with the Special Investigating Unit. We have heard from the SIU, from the Hawks, that they are conducting investigation, but the focus has primarily been on the elements of fraud and corruption. Were those tenders obtained lawfully? Were there any kickbacks being paid? Is there any political connection? SAHPRA is telling me that they're filling in on their side of their legal mandate. So they're working hand in hand with the SIU, where companies have been identified on that long list that has been released by Treasury. They are looking in to see whether each one of those have obtained the required licenses and whether the products they're selling are in fact registered. What they've told me that so far 5 companies have already been charged. I've asked for the names of those companies. They're a bit reluctant to give them, but we'll certainly keep trying. But that's where we stand. 5 companies charged so far for transgressing the Medicines Act.
All right, Barry Bateman live for us in Pretoria. We'll continue to follow that story with a great deal of interest and concern. Coming up to 1:30 once again, let's